Hey, it's Tess, content creator, model, presenter, and host of the Tess Talks podcast, on a mission to ignite curiosity. I read one of your books a few years ago, and that's when I first deep dived into your work, and I was very impressed with your credentials and everyone that you've worked with. I mean, you've worked with names like Taylor Swift and Rihanna and a bunch of Fortune 500 companies, obviously always focusing on viral content and online presence. So I'm really excited for today's chat, and I know a lot of my listeners will get a lot out of what you have to say, and I'm excited to touch on some tangible strategies and tools that they can use to help grow their own social presence. So for those of my listeners that haven't heard of you, you are a digital strategist, a growth expert, founder of Hook Point, and author of a few books, which we'll delve on definitely throughout our conversation, but known for helping brands, celebrities, and companies expand their online presence. So I hope I've given you a good enough spiel there.
Yeah,
But I'd love
thank you.
great. I'd love to hear from your own mouth though a little bit about your background and like how you first got into this line of work.
Yeah, so I've been in social media for over 20 years. So I started in 2005, back when like MySpace was the predominant player at the time. Like it was MySpace had 25 million users, Facebook had
Oh,
6 million. It was still reserved for college students, and YouTube in their first year reached 8 million. So
yeah,
it's
wow.
a far cry from the 5.2 billion people that use social media today.
Yeah.
But the way that I got into it is I initially went to film school. I wanted to produce movies and quickly realized in film school they teach you nothing about business. So I figured the best way
Mm,
to learn about business is start your own. And the most cost efficient way at the time was to just create online companies. So
mm,
I gained a lot of experience in kind of how the internet was working, digital media, and things of that nature. And then when I moved to LA in 2005 to pursue a career in film, obviously, like everybody, you start at the bottom. You're making coffee, deliveries, copies, and things of that nature. And you're looking
mm,
for what is that extra edge? How can I stand out to connect with the heads of the studio, directors, and producers, and things of that nature? But
mm.
when people ask me, like, Brendan, why did you move to LA? And I would tell them I wanted to be a film producer, everybody's eyes would glaze over because you're just one of a million people. It's just like, okay.
One of
So
those.
I, yeah. So I knew I needed to find a way to kind of stand out. Like, what was my hook? What was my hook point to really grab attention and um, forge those connections. And I noticed that whenever we finished a movie, the studio I was working for, we would invest anywhere from like 15 to like $50 million into a movie and then commit to tens of millions of dollars more. But every time I noticed in the office when we finished a film, there'd be a sense of anxiety and stress that would come over the office because you just invested all this money and it's like completely different than any other business. Like you don't have years or decades to build awareness. You literally have months to get hundreds of millions of people around the world to know about this single piece of content.
Mm,
So basically, I realized at the time, again, this was 2005, we were over reliant on traditional media, which is very expensive, meaning television commercials, um, print, radio, things of that nature. And then social media was just coming on the scene. So I basically just went to the head of the studio and said, hey, let me test these kind of ideas, these methodologies, and things like that, because it's going to cost us a fraction of what traditional media is charging us. And in some cases, no cost at all. So, for example, I did the first influencer campaign on YouTube in
mm,
2006 for a movie called Crank with Jason Statham. So that's
mm.
kind of how I got into that space. Is really just pioneering some of the first social media campaigns for movie studios, and then my career just kind of continued down that path.
Wow, it's amazing, isn't it? Like a true OG. I feel like I haven't heard the term MySpace in so many years. Like back when we had all of our top 10 friends and it was pretty savage out there.
Tom and Tom being our best friend.
Yeah, a good old Tom. So, how did that continue to progress for you, and how did you start to see the industry shifting and changing over those next few years?
Yeah, so I think that the first place is, so I did that, the first ever influencer campaign, And from there, I wanted to keep innovating in that space. Now, I just want to point out, like at that time, there was no such thing as an influencer. There was no such thing
Mm,
as a YouTuber. There were just basically people creating content online. So I wanted to continue innovating in that way. And then I built what became the first ever influencer technology platform on top of MySpace because I just realized, it back then when we're talking like 2005 to 2008, none of these platforms had their own ad network. So Facebook ads didn't exist.
mm,
YouTube's ad platform didn't exist. They were relying on third party like banner ad networks. So
mm,
MySpace really wasn't making a lot of money, and Fox just acquired them for $600 million. And I
mm,
saw, if you remember back to MySpace, is like it was all about customizing your profile. Like you would change the backgrounds and the colors. You would put, like, if you're a fan of like Prada, you would put a Prada, logo, or a
mm,
Nike logo, or your favorite movie trailer. And I just saw that that was the most valuable form of advertising, because it was peer to peer sharing. However, MySpace wasn't making any of that money. So the most valuable form of advertising was basically happening behind the scenes without that. So I basically built a technology that would allow creators to take those same assets, put it on their MySpace profile. They would get compensated as like an influencer gets compensated today, but then the networks would as well. So I basically built that, licensed it to MTV and Viacom, and we created a partnership through that. And that was kind of
wow.
between those two elements, or those two campaigns, my career started to take off from there. But
Mm,
in terms of like your question of like, how did things kind of shift over time? So, as I mentioned, when I started in 2005, we're talking about 25 million people on MySpace, 6 million on Facebook, 8 million on YouTube. It's at its pure infancy. So, if we look at the history of social media, by 2010, it had grown to 970 million users. By
mm,
2015, it went to 2.2 billion. By 2020, it was 3.96 billion. And today we're at over 5.2 billion. So
mm,
one of the biggest shifts in dynamics of what has progressed in terms of the history of social media is purely the amount of people that are creating content on these platforms. So at a certain point, there was so much content that these platforms essentially had to create the algorithms, and the algorithms are
mm,
really designed to do one thing, and that is to prioritize what content it should seed to people that is going to keep them on the platform longer,
mm,
because these platforms live and die by their ability to retain audience, meaning the longer people spend on the platforms, the more ads they can serve, the more profit they generate. So
mhm,
if any one of us opened up our favorite social media app, there's probably 150,000 pieces of content that it could seed to you based upon the people that you follow, the content you've engaged with. Now, obviously, it can't seed you 150,000 pieces of content because you wouldn't be able to retain that much
mm,
information. So it's there to prioritize, well, what are the top 10, 15, 20 posts that I should put in this person's feed that has the highest likelihood of keeping them on the platform longer.
mm,
So, as over time from 2005 to today, as more content was coming on the scene, these algorithms were invented and became much more, I would say, picky about the content it's going to seed. So,
mm,
people 10 years ago that were creating content, it was very easy. It was very simple. Like, if you think about even like 2010, it's like you get somebody to follow you, you post, and people see it.
mm,
Today, that's not the case. You could have millions of followers and you're not guaranteed that free win. Why? Because that um, feed is like the holy grail of what drives these platforms. And they just need to make sure they're prioritizing the best stories, they're prioritizing the content that is playing to their underlying business goals and objectives.
mm. Yeah, someone who's been in it myself, I've been in content creation for probably 10 years. It's been amazing myself to see the shift. And I think, especially after or during COVID, and that was, I think, for us in Australia, really where TikTok really took off. But noticing what changed in how I had to start creating content and how much more thought and strategy I had to start putting on it into it to get noticed, it was a significant shift. And it was something I think a lot of us, like original creators, we weren't necessarily ready for. And I think quite a few got left behind. I want to go into all the platforms and I really want to delve into the algorithm with you. But I think what's fun to start at, and based on one of the books I read of yours, is that you grew 1 million followers in 30 days. So, what would you say are like some of the key principles behind that success?
Yeah, so I think that and it still holds true today in terms of like my entire kind of experience of like spending 2 decades really understanding what does it mean to break through, stand out, and what does it mean for
Mm,
when something doesn't stand out, and
mm,
to really simplify it down. And we can obviously get into the depth of it, but I want to start at like the 10,000 foot level. Like, what dictates consistent success? So everything that we're talking about today is not how do we go viral once, how about how do we consistently break through, how do we consistently connect with audiences. And
mm,
it really comes down to one thing, and that's storytelling. Like,
mm,
how effective are you in telling a story? Because as we've talked about, the algorithms, they want retention. So really, our team at Hook Point's done 10,000 hours of research into like analyzing content of like how and why things break through, how and why
mm,
things fail to break through. And one of the key insights is storytelling leads to retention, and that
mm,
equates to success. So if we
mm,
even think about telling like a bedtime story to a child, or you think about we sit down to watch a movie we're super excited about, we saw a trailer, like what happens in that
mm,
experience is like once we start that story, we ultimately want to hear what happens at the end of that story. And
mm,
that's what really builds success across these platforms, is our ability to hook somebody in. Hey, we're going to tell you a compelling story. And as long as our storytelling uh, skill set is in line, you're going to hold that attention because people want to find out what the end of that story is. Now,
mm,
stories can happen in 30 seconds, they can happen in 20 minutes, they can happen in 2 hours. There's not a specific particular length in it. So, in
mm,
terms of going back to your original question of generating 1 million followers in 30 days, like, first off, that was really an experiment. It wasn't like trying to turn myself into an influencer or creator. It's just I had been working with, major brands and celebrities and things of that nature, and I kept
mm,
getting this reoccurring theme of, well, it's great you worked with Taylor Swift or MTV or Yahoo, but like, what does it have to do with me? Like starting from scratch, like,
mm,
or somebody that's not a major celebrity. And I had done so much work that I knew these elements could be replicated, especially with social media, which, if you think about social media, it democratized mass communication, meaning it
mm,
democratized your ability to reach the masses. Because prior to social media, you had to go through a television network, a radio producer, you had to have a publicist or big budgets and things. It was really reserved for
mm,
celebrities, the well connected, the biggest budgets. But today, literally with social media, anybody with a phone, if you have a great story, can reach the masses.
mm,
So that's kind of the foundation of everything I've done. And I just wanted to prove with that experiment that people starting from scratch, starting from zero, could build a massive audience. So, in
mm,
terms of doing that initial experiment, um, it was all about finding different stories that I could tell, different ways to package stories to really tell which ones would be shared at the highest velocity and which ones would equate to somebody actually taking that action of clicking the follow button.
mm. It's so I love that you said all that because one of my questions was going to be around that, like the difference between going viral and building a community, and then like having an audience that are really like active and listening to what you're saying and they actually care about you. And I think that can sometimes be a lot harder to achieve, especially with apps like TikTok, where it's very easy and almost um, hits that dopamine receptor when we're recreating these trending videos and we're seeing little bits go viral, but actually finding that pathway to get like consistency and longevity, it's I think something that creators find, and businesses too, a lot more challenging.
I think it's a really great question, and at Hook Point and the work that we do, uh, we kind of have a different definition of virality because as you said,
Mm,
like virality can mean so many things to so many different people. The
mm,
first fundamental thing is we never believe in like going viral for the sake of going viral. Like the
mm,
content itself has to be tied to your expertise, your niche, has to play to your underlying business goals and objectives because if it isn't, like you're literally just going to end up burning yourself out, like because if it doesn't
mm,
yield to the results that you're looking for and the reason you're doing it, creator fatigue, creator burnout is a real thing.
mm,
Um, so that is the first point of it. In addition, the way that kind of I look at going viral in the definition is I just think going viral is equal to capturing attention, and that
mm,
attention needs to lead to what your underlying goals and objectives are. So for some people, getting 10,000 views is enough. Others, it's 100,000. Other people, it's millions, it's tens of millions, hundreds of millions. It just, it's all comes down to are you having the impact that you want with the efforts that you're putting into social media?
mm,
Like you said, like I know people that have under 100,000 followers that make seven figures a year. I know people with millions of followers that make less than six figures a year. It
mm,
really comes down to the foundation of the content strategy, making sure it's aligned with the business. But just as important, what is the foundation of the business that you have?
mm,
So, for example, I get asked this question a lot is like, Brendan, what is the ROI of social media? If I put the time, energy, and resources into social media, what's my ROI going to be? Or if I engage with your company Hook Point, what's the ROI going to be? And the
mm,
reality is the ROI is as big as your vision. It's as big as your business. So I'll give you an example. A friend of mine, Michelle Fan, was one of the original beauty influencers on YouTube, built millions of subscribers, millions of views. Now,
mm,
if you look at a lot of the beauty influencers, they do brand deals, and maybe they make six figures. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but you can look at Michelle, who instead of just doing those brand deals, she decided to leverage her audience and leverage her expertise to found a company called Ipsy, which was a beauty subscription service. Within 3 years, that business was doing $120 million a year in revenue and was once valued at 800 million. And you could
mm,
point to beauty influencers the exact same size that were maybe doing, low to mid six figures a year. So
mm,
it's again, it's really about the foundation and the strategy that you're putting in place that dictates like what does going viral actually mean for me as a business and what
mm.
does it actually equate to in terms of the goals and aspirations that I have for what I'm trying to build.
Mm. So, if we delve into some of the key principles that you would share, if we start with storytelling, what would be like one of the first steps that you would recommend to a client on how they can start and hash out their storytelling messaging?
So the first place that I always start with is it's a mindset shift. So
Mm,
we are all professional content consumers. We consume so much content on social media,
mm,
but a lot of us are just using it from a passive experience. We're just using it for entertainment value to connect with friends and things of that nature. So we need to make a shift to like an expert content creator. We need to start actually paying attention. Oh, this video has 2 million views. Why? Oh, this video only has
mm,
10,000 views. Why? And what we're looking for is repeatable patterns or structures. So
mm,
things that have occurred many times over. And we called those storytelling formats. So, just to kind of give you some examples of formats. So, one that everybody's probably seen is man on the street. So, you approach a random stranger in the street and you engage with them in some ways. I have a friend, Alex Stemp, who uses it as a professional photographer. He's built an audience of 20 million people. There's another account that uses it for business advice. It's called the School of Hard Knocks. There's people that use it in real estate that approach random strangers in the street and say, "Can I do a home tour?"
mm,
That's an example. Another example of a format that everybody's probably seen is called two characters, one light bulb. And that's where it's the same person playing two different characters and they're
mm,
breaking down a common misconception. So, like Erica Kolberg does that about fine print on like what happens when your Nike shoes break, what's the warranty, what happens when your flight gets canceled, things of that nature.
mm,
So those are just two examples. At Hookpoint, we've analyzed over 300 of these. So I just say that there are so many of these options out there. So the first thing that we have to do is make that mindset shift from passive to active, start looking for these formats. And a big thing is understanding the difference between a trend and a format. So we
Mm,
probably all heard the word trend. Like trends are very fleeting. Like you think about the ice bucket challenge, like nobody does that
mm,
anymore. It was like one of
mm,
the biggest trends back in the day. So we need to look for repeatable success. So how do we do that? Um, we have a process that we created, the hook point format finder, and simply that process is at a very high level is you find a viral video in your feed and you click the creator's profile and you see, did they use that same structure, that same format at least 5 or 10 times with high level success and the millions of views.
mm,
If not, then it's likely a trend or it's likely something that's not repeatable success. So that
mm,
first step is just to understand that formats exist, because a lot of creators don't even understand it, or they may
mm,
see other creators having success but they can't put their finger on what it is. So
mm,
that's really the first place, is to identify these repeatable structures, the repeatable formats that are vehicles to tell stories.
mm. So, if we did like a real life example for a format of someone in my field, say a lifestyle content creator, what do you see as some successful formats in that field?
Can you give me more example in terms of what type of lifestyle things you cover?
So, let's say motherhood, health and wellness, and day in the life kind of content.
So there's a few, like two characters, one light bulb is a good one because you can break down
Mm,
different misconceptions about motherhood or things of that nature.
mm,
There's another format, walking listicles, where basically you have a listicle, you're walking around the block, um, breaking things down. There's a guy named Robert Croak that does it successfully. There's another one that's doing really well. It's called Tips on the Move. You can look at
mhm,
Mark Tilbury, and basically he's breaking down tips around, he does it for business and finance, but it could be
mhm,
leveraged for any type of lifestyle. But basically, he's breaking it down as he's moving into different environments and settings.
mm,
You could do expert reacts as well, like a reaction video of
mhm,
reacting to content and breaking down those things. So
mm,
those are just kind of a few, like from a short form
mm,
perspective. If you want to go into long form, listicles are a long form format that work. There's also explainer videos where you can go depth into a specific aspect of it. But
mm.
those are just a few that come to mind.
I think what's great too is what you post a lot and share a lot is like comparing different videos and why one was successful and why one wasn't. So I think for anyone who's like maybe thinking, okay, but how do I like first figure out what format's going to work for me? I feel like your platform is probably a really good place to start.
Yeah, and I would say there's and it's a great question to bring up. There's two things that I ask people to think about and answer as they're trying to identify the right format.
Mm,
Number one is, what is the resources that you have available? Because you do not need to stretch beyond the resources that you have. Like
mm,
if you are a solopreneur and just have a phone, there are formats literally that you can do that. Like we have clients that have zero social media experience, just have an iPhone, talking into the iPhone with a specific format, and can have consistent success. And then there's obviously formats that require a little bit more equipment or team help and things of that nature. But I don't like, especially starting out in mastering storytelling, don't try and stretch yourself beyond the resources you have.
mm, mm,
And then the second question is, what actually excites you? Like, again,
mm,
we've analyzed over 300 formats and we're analyzing new ones every day. There is so much to choose from. So I
mm,
don't want people to just select a format because they see somebody being successful with it and feel like, well, I need to do this because I don't really resonate with this format, but they're having so much success, I need to do it for
mm,
myself. Pick one that really excites you, that you will love waking up and creating, that you will have fun with it, because
mm.
that will ensure that you'll actually stick with it over the long run and have success with it.
I think that's such good advice because it also comes down to that authenticity. And I feel like now people are just so clocked on to when authenticity is coming through the camera and when it's not. And it's all good and well to try and recreate someone else's format, but it doesn't mean that that's necessarily going to resonate with people who are watching it.
100%. Like, and I'll just be transparent. Like so like the man on the street format, we've analyzed like 10 different versions of it. Like we
Mm,
understand that format at a very deep level. And we went out and tested it for myself, and we did two shoots, and it wasn't something that I was resonating with. It wasn't something
Mm.
that I connected with personally.
Mm.
And I just felt like there's other formats that I think better express my personality that I'm going to enjoy more. So through that learning, we've moved on to a different format. So it's even
Mm.
with myself, we follow that same advice. It is so important to make sure that you have a format that you truly love and in really enjoy and appreciate, and
Mm.
fits you to that authentic voice.
So, say you've kind of discovered that voice, that part of yourself, or that, I guess, version that your brand is aligning with. The age old question is quality versus quantity. So, should someone just be churning out posts multiple times a day, or should they really be focusing on this strategy and this quality and maybe posting a little less, but ensuring that quality is there? Or is it like kind of a hybrid of the two?
So it's 100% quality versus quantity. You
Mm.
can increase frequency once you master that format. But let me kind of dive into like what is like the third thing after you've mastered that mindset, you've selected your format. 99% of people fail because they don't do this step, and that is they don't actually analyze the format. So, for example, they'll see a man on the street, they'll be like, "Oh, I see what that person's doing. They're just approaching random stranger in the street and engaging with them." When there are so many nuances in terms of
Mm.
what makes that format successful and unsuccessful. So one of the things that we created, it's called the gold, silver, bronze process. So essentially what we'll do is um we'll take a, let's just say, man on the street, because we're talking about, there's an account
Mm.
called School of Hard Knocks that does it for business advice. They generate hundreds of millions of views, have millions of followers. So if we wanted to do man on the street for business advice, like what we would do is we would create a spreadsheet, and we would take 5 or 10 of the highest performers. So that's probably 10 million views plus for that channel. Then like the average performers, which is a million, and then which is the silver, and then the bronze, the underperformers would be like a few 100,000 views or less.
Mm.
And essentially, what we do is we look at those high performers, the gold, and we watch them side by side with the bronze underperformers. And we're analyzing, like, what is the difference between them? And typically, it's not about the content, it's more about the context and these small little elements of how the story unfolds. So it could be things like the pacing, the tonality, the framing, the reaction of the person that you're engaging with,
Mm.
what happens in the first 3 seconds, captions, title cards, all these small little nuances. And
Mm.
that's where you uncover the real storytelling elements that make it successful versus unsuccessful. Like an
Mm.
analogy is I went to film school. And the interesting thing about film school is I wanted to be a film producer. But even though I wanted to produce film, they made you direct short films. They made you act in short films. They made you write screenplays. They made you learn lighting. They made you learn editing. Why? Because all of those elements contribute to a successful movie or not. I'm sure there's
Mm.
a lot of people out there that were super excited to watch a movie because of the trailer, and then they sit down and like, that was horrible. It's
Mm.
typically horrible because one of those small elements is off. Like I worked for an Academy Award winning producer when I started out. And even them, like really, experienced people that are making movies for 30 years. If they made a movie and one element was off, maybe it was the chemistry between the actors, or maybe
Mm.
the screenplay just wasn't dialed in, or the director, just didn't bring his A game. Like one of those elements could destroy the entire quality of the movie. And the same thing applies to social media. It's
Mm.
pure storytelling. And as we're telling a story, all these little nuances contribute to the success or lack thereof. So that's a
Mm.
big determining factor in terms of like how we actually master, perfecting this. And going
Mm.
back to your question of quality versus quantity, we need to master the art of these qualitative elements. And then once we do, then we can increase the frequency. But if we're just focused on
Mm.
pushing out as many posts as possible, we're typically not, you know, creating an opportunity for us to learn from each post and improve with each post.
And I want to touch on how that can be correlated to the algorithm, but I'll come back to that because you touched on, like, for example, those like first 3 seconds. And I've seen people talk about how that is so important. And so, like, using little different hooks, like, I don't know, drinking from your coffee or like stirring your Starbucks or popping on your makeup, or that's obviously something that's like all in my field. But are there any kind of like top kind of hooks that you've seen just like perform incredibly over others?
So number one, in terms of kind of like the hooks that you just kind of mentioned, obviously you will see people doing that and going viral. But what people don't pay attention to is the other 99% that don't go viral doing that exact same thing. Like, it's
Mm,
kind of the tip of the iceberg element. Is the hook is critically important, but if the rest of the story isn't there aligned, it
mm,
doesn't matter. So I think one of the biggest pieces of advice of I can give, and where people mainly go wrong with their hooks, is we look at the visual hierarchy. A lot of people, what they'll try and do is they'll have like a meme card on top, captions on the bottom, talking your movement at the same time. And if we have all of these visual elements happening, visual and audio elements happening at the same time,
mm,
we can get, our subconscious can get lost. They don't know, what should I be prioritizing? What should I be thinking about, first, second, third, fourth. And that
mm,
can detract from a lot of attention. So first, don't try and overwhelm the viewer in terms of that. You want to make sure that there's a clear visual hierarchy of what you're trying to convey.
mm,
And then the other big one is making sure that you're setting a clear expectation of what you're going to be delivering in that video. And that doesn't have to be text, and it doesn't have to be um, necessarily dialogue or you talking. It can be like a visual cue.
mm,
But one of the other kind of big parts of thinking about a successful hook is what is breaking the pattern, because again, we're constantly scrolling through content, and we need to think about, well, what is the last 5 pieces of content that they've seen, and how can we visually break the pattern of like what they've just seen. And also
mm,
making sure that, like, if you're talking about, being a mom or some type of lifestyle thing, the subject matter you're covering has probably been covered a million times. you know that doesn't mean that what your perspective isn't unique. Your perspective's unique. The audience doesn't know that your perspective is
mm,
unique. So you want to make sure that you're not setting the expectation in their mind that I know what the outcome of this video is, and I
mm,
likely know that I've heard this before, even if your perspective is completely different. That
mm,
hook needs to set up that your perspective is completely different, so that you can get people to pay attention to it. So
mm,
I'll give you an example of it. So there's a YouTuber, Graham Stephan, that teaches finance to millennials. Now, finance is not sexy, it's not interesting, uh, but he created a video, how I bought a Tesla for $78 a month. So that sets up
mm,
a completely different expectation, a completely unique hook. Whereas if he would have started out like, I'm going to teach you the 5 best principles to maximize the lowest, car lease that you can get, like, I probably kind of know that. Like, I probably heard it, some of those things. And also, it's not super interesting or revolutionary for me to do it. So
mm,
instead of, that video would probably generate 10,000 views, he generated 10 million views because he has this unique perspective, this unique hook, without diluting his expertise or the things that he wants to teach around finance.
mm. Okay, so for someone listening who's like, okay, I feel like I've created content and I'm ticking like a few of these boxes and I feel like my content is really strong, and then it flops. I want to talk about the algorithm because I feel like there's a lot of confusion around the algorithm, and is my content being deemed negative by the algorithm? Am I not getting noticed by the algorithm? So I know you've done a fantastic 60-second explanation on your Instagram that I feel like everyone should watch, but I want you to dive into it and explain to us, how do the algorithms actually work?
Yes. So, at a very kind of simplistic and high level, all of these social media platforms outside of LinkedIn, LinkedIn is kind of the outlier,
Mm,
but all these social media platforms rely on revenue from an ad perspective, meaning they have advertisers that come and spend money to reach this audience. Now, that inventory, the amount of inventory that they have available, is predicated based upon the number of people that use these platforms and how long they use these platforms from a daily perspective.
Mm,
So, in reality, the more people that stay on the platforms longer, the more ads they can serve. Now, the interesting thing about social media is we are the fuel that runs them. We are the content. This isn't like Netflix or Disney where they spend billions and billions of dollars to create original content to get people to subscribe and retain that audience on their streaming platforms. So
mm,
they need people like you and I and everybody listening to this to create content that acts as the fuel that keeps this engine going. So, with that in mind, these platforms are looking for content creators and content that not doesn't just stop the scroll but holds attention longer than the other content that they could see to your follower or other people to keep them on the platforms longer. So
mm,
one of the big kind of myths out there is the algorithms are suppressing your reach on purpose to get you to boost posts.
mm,
There's two reasons that's just inherently false. Number one, I've managed over $200 million in advertising spend over the course of my career. They do not make money off of the average creator spending $10 to boost a post. They make
mm,
money off of the big corporations and brands spending billions and billions of dollars on these platforms.
mm,
Number two, if that were the case, then no kind of influencer like Mr. Beast started at 13 years old in his bedroom in North Carolina. Why would he ever build and be able to build an audience if it was just favored for people with the biggest budgets? And
mm,
I'm sure people listening to this can think about their favorite, influencers. Those people would not exist if the algorithms just favored people, paying for reach.
mm,
So again, what it is, it's kind of it's really survival of the fittest, but it's survival of the best storytellers, like the people that can grab attention and
mm,
hold attention long enough. Now, if you're just starting out in terms of how the algorithms work, is like let's say you're at like 10,000 followers or tens of thousands of followers. What is essentially happening is when you post something, it'll probably, let's say, seed it to like 500 people. And it's going to measure the responses like, well, how many of those 500 people stopped and watched, a good chunk of that video? And if it matches up with what they're looking for based on the other content they have available to serve, it's going to extend it to another 500. And then
mm,
again, another 500, another 500. However, if at one of those thresholds, let's say those first 500, it's not holding up, it's just going to kill and suppress the reach right away.
mm,
But as you become a better content creator, you've earned more trust and credibility. Instead of starting with 500 people, it may start with like 10,000 or 50,000. If you
mm,
look at somebody like Mr. Beast, when he's, posts a video, he can get like 5 million views in the first hour. Why?
mm,
Because he's built up that much credibility in the platform that they give him that much, leeway. It's kind of similar to like
mm,
Netflix. If you get Martin Scorsese to direct a movie, they're more likely to put it on the home screen because they know he's
mm,
proven to tell a great story versus an unknown, director. They may have to kind of seed it to a number of people and see kind of what the retention kind of looks like with that specific movie or TV show.
mm. Okay, so you're talking about watches and retention, but what about, say, like comments and likes versus shares and saves, for example?
So again, it plays down to how much time people are spending with content. So
Mm,
if you are spending time writing a comment, it's highly likely that it's correlated to how much of the video that you've watched. In
mm,
addition to liking the video, there's likely a high correlation with that.
mm,
Same with saving. Now, the one thing that Instagram has talked about is they are favoring shares
mm,
because they see retention building through DMs of people communicating around content. But if you
mm,
think about it, it all stems back to how engaged is the individual with the actual piece of content. It's
mm,
highly unlikely that they're going to like, comment, or share a piece of content if they haven't at least watched, a good chunk of it. Like
mm,
if 95% of people like a post, but they only watch 3 seconds of it, it's not likely that it's going to overcome that because again,
Mm.
they're taking all of these factors into consideration and matching it against all of the other content that it could seed to people based upon the people they follow and the content they've engaged with.
So you're seeing that there's like a correlation between the algorithms across all the major social media platforms, or is there kind of different nuances that you look at when you're working across different platforms?
So I mean, there's definitely differences, but they all have the
Mm,
same goal, and that's
mm,
keeping people on the platforms longer. Now, LinkedIn's a little bit different because they rely on subscription revenue, like that's where a majority of their revenue comes from.
mm,
But I would say the nuances between the platforms really come in terms of consumption behavior and user interface.
mm,
So, like, even though on the surface level, TikTok and Reels can look very similar, there are subtle differences in terms of the user interface, how people engage with that content. So,
mm,
certain formats may only work on certain platforms, or certain formats need to be slightly tweaked for certain platforms. Now,
mm,
YouTube is definitely an outlier in that, putting shorts aside for a minute, long form YouTube is the only platform out of all of them that has mastered long form consumption.
mm,
So YouTube literally, you can get somebody to watch a podcast for 2 hours. Like you can
mm,
get somebody to watch a video for 20 minutes. Whereas TikTok and Instagram and Facebook, that's not going to happen. I'm not going to say it never happens, but it's highly unlikely because
mm,
people have been trained from a subconscious level that if I'm going for TikTok, I'm going to spend 30 to 60 seconds on a video max. If I'm
mm,
going to Instagram and looking at Reel, it's going to be 30 to 60-second max.
mm,
Where YouTube, you're going in with the mindset like, and again, a lot of this is happening on a subconscious level.
mm,
I'm willing to sit there and watch something for 10, 20, 30 minutes or beyond.
mm. Yeah, it's so interesting because it's funny. I feel like what I notice a lot is like you'll post something on TikTok and it can go viral, but the exact same video will not go viral on Instagram. So why is that?
Again, it comes down to the user interface.
Mm,
It comes down to the type of content that people are typically engaging with. So, for
mm,
example, um, TikTok is a little bit raw in
mm,
terms of it's not super polished content that's often breaking through versus
mm,
Instagram and YouTube can be more polished. People are more accustomed to a little bit more of a polished look and feel. But then again, it's there's certain formats that will work across certain platforms as
mm,
well. So typically, what I recommend is start with the format that you want to do that you're super excited about,
mm,
and the format will dictate the platform that you initially focus on,
mm,
and just master the art of that single format and that single platform. It doesn't mean you can't post it on others, but don't get
mm,
caught up in the performance on the other
mm,
platforms. Just focus on really mastering that skill set of what it means to tell a compelling story, that to be able to consistently drive virality, be able to look
mm,
back and say, well, I've used this format and I've gone viral 10, 15, 20 times. I know what it means to be successful with it. Then once
mm,
you've mastered that, then you can go back to the other platforms and say, do I just need to make subtle tweaks in
mm.
this, specific format to make it work, or do I need to select a different format for each platform?
So, do you think at all that the Instagram algorithm has changed over, say, the last 5 years? Because I know a lot of businesses and creators say that they don't feel like they get the same reach there as they once did.
Well, they 100% don't, and that's because there's more people on the platforms creating more content.
Mm,
So there's less room for attention
mm,
across creators. So it's just, are there shifts in the algorithm? Yes, they're not like major shifts that people kind of think. The reality is
mm,
it's just getting more cutthroat for who is the best storyteller.
mm,
But you can still. The reality is all the things that we've talked about today, like 99% of creators are not doing this. So
mm,
if you just start implementing these elements, then you're going to be ahead of the curve and your
mm,
chances of succeeding are going to be much higher because you're going to understand if something doesn't break through, why it doesn't, and how to
mm.
fix it and refine the strategy going forward.
So I guess you're giving a bit of hope because I think some people can look at it as, especially when you said all the crazy numbers that you have about how it has grown over the last, decade. People are thinking, is it oversaturated or is it a huge opportunity? And I feel like you're giving a little bit of optimism that if you put the hard work in, you can get seen and you can get noticed and you can go viral and create a community.
100%. It's a massive opportunity. I mean, you're talking about 5 billion
Mm,
people in the world using these platforms, and it's it does require hard work, but
mm,
it's more strategy. It's more understanding how and why these platforms work, how and why
mm,
content works versus content failing. It's more really understanding the the fact that this is storytelling. This is not about how we beat the
mm,
algorithms. This is not about hacks. This is not about tricks. It's not even really getting caught up in the algorithm, because the
mm,
algorithm, all it's doing is pushing content, at a wide scale that resonates with people. So it's
mm,
basically just gauging real people interaction to the stories that you're telling. And if
mm,
you become a masterful storyteller, you're going to win no matter what algorithm shift happens, because they're
mm,
always going to want to just favor content that keeps people on the platforms longer. So I
mm,
think oftentimes people are getting caught up in terms of like the algorithm is the enemy. The algorithm is out to
mm,
get me. I need to figure out how to hack it. I need to figure out how to, find tactics and tricks, and like I just need
mm.
to post as much content as possible, when at the simplest level it's just really mastering storytelling.
I honestly love that so much. Like, I feel like you have just cleared up so much and for so many creators and businesses. But you did touch on it a little earlier, and I did want to bring it up because as a content creator, I do know that consistency is one of the hardest things. And it's one thing that I think where a lot of creators probably end up falling flat is because they can't find that motivation to keep going. Because as you said, it is a lot of work and it's not easy. So, what are your like best tips for like staying motivated as a creator and continuously creating content?
So the first one we've already covered, but it's really important. So I want to reiterate it: is what is the underlying business model that you have? Like,
Mm,
what does because I think one of the things that burns people out is or frustrates people is when they don't see necessarily the ROI on their time or their energy or resources, and
mm,
then they need to, like, let's just say you want to be an influencer. Like, if you're solely reliant on income coming from being an influencer and you're not seeing that income come in, what are you going to do? You're going to get another job or something. And if you have another job, obviously it drains the time and energy and resources that you can put towards creating content.
mm,
Same thing with a business owner. Like, if you're a business owner and you're not seeing the ROI come in from the efforts that you're putting into it,
mm,
then that is kind of like a demotivator. But
mm,
obviously, as human beings, if we're seeing success, it ultimately fuels the motivation.
mm,
Now, there will be a time period, especially if you're just starting out, that you need that kind of ramp up time period. So, what I
mm,
say is get very clear on what your larger mission is. Like, what do
mm,
you want to be a year from now? What do you want to be 5 years from now? What do you want to be 10 years from now? And what is it going to feel like when you reach that? Like, what is
mm,
it going to feel like when you know can support your family, or you reach a specific goal, or you have a specific impact? It's different for every person, and you should find whatever that truly is and
mm,
really visualize that and map that out of what your end goal is. And
mm,
that will be your North Star as things get difficult, as you're kind of progressing to kind of where you're seeing that outcome you're looking for. And then in
mm,
addition is like what we talked about earlier, is make sure that you're not setting yourself short with this.
mm,
um, because if your focus is, how do I get my next client, how do I get my next brand deal, how do I sell my next product, and you're not looking at the larger vision of what you can potentially achieve, then you may just be stuck at a very kind of um, lower opportunity of what you can actually achieve. Like, going back to what we were
mm,
talking about with Michelle Phan and creating a company valued at $800 million versus
mm,
the average beauty influencer making six figures a year. Now, maybe your dream is just to be a beauty influencer or an influencer that makes six figures a deal. If that's what motivates you and that's what you're truly passionate about, then that's amazing. Like
Mm,
there's no specific answer for a broad kind of audience. It's whatever kind of
mm.
drives you, whatever motivates you. Like that is the biggest advice that I can give as you're getting into this.
It's honestly amazing advice. So for anyone that like wants more, you've obviously got 3 books. You've got Hook Point, you've got 1 million followers, and your newer one, The Guide to Going Viral. So where would you recommend that like people first start?
So, so the guide to going viral dives deep into the methodology of like the process I've talked through today.
Mm,
Hook Point uh, talks about some of that methodology, but it's more about kind of how do you really stand out? How do you position yourself to beat out your competitors and just stand out in a noisy world? Where the guide to going viral is kind of more tactical process. But if they go to hookpoint.com, they can get both of those books for free. They can download
oh
PDFs. We have
wow,
it available for free on hookpoint.com. So I would
amazing.
start there. 1 million followers. There's still a lot of valuable information in it.
Mm.
It's a little bit older. The guide to going viral came out like 6 months ago, and I actually just rewrote Hook Point. Um, and we released a new version of it at the beginning or the end of last year.
Yeah, that's the beauty of this industry. It's so ever evolving that it's going to keep you on your toes, I'm sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time. I love to end my episodes by asking my guests to leave just one lasting message or thought or piece of advice or wisdom in the Test Talk Diary. You've already given us a whole bunch, but do you have one lasting message you would like to leave behind?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate something that I've said a few times because I think it's critically important is like from my perspective, social media is not a platform. It is an opportunity to build something truly extraordinary.
Mm,
And the limit to what you build is just the limitation that you have on your vision. So just
mm,
think is as big as humanly possible of what you want to achieve. And
mm.
social media can help you to go down that path and reach those dreams that you have.
That's honestly so inspiring. Thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. It was a true pleasure connecting with you and everybody that tuned into this. I appreciate you having me.
Totally. And I'll make sure to put all your details in the show notes below so people can find you. Thanks so much for listening. If you loved the episode, please subscribe, rate, and review. It honestly means so much and helps to keep these conversations going. And I'd love to connect with you. You can message me on Instagram or TikTok, and I've left all the details from the episode in the show notes below. I'll see you next week.